Welcome to another show of Called to Serve. Today we have with us Father Learoy Rodrigues from the Jesuits in Mumbai. He currently is the Dean of Studies at the West Zone Juniorate at Vinalaya, Mumbai. He currently teaches the students of the first year Juniorate Culture, Music, Language and Drama. Welcome on the show, Father.
Thank you so much.
Could you share with us your vocation testimony? What inspired you to choose the priesthood?
First of all, my vocation story is not as interesting as that of Paul of Tarsus, and neither as dramatic as some other vocation stories can be. But the beauty of it all has been how God has worked beautifully in me, even when I least knew it as a young boy, as a child, and while I was growing up. You know, my parents were in the Gulf in Bahrain. I was born in Bahrain. I have a younger sister. My father expired a few years ago. I have my mother with me. And we grew up in Bahrain in the Gulf. And when I was about 5 years old, my mother chose to bring both me and my sister to India so that we could start studying here. And my dad carried on over there. Now, when we came to India, she looked very much for a Jesuit parish. The Jesuits, we know, are a huge Catholic organization of priests and brothers,
Yes.
an organization I love very much. And my mother also loved, because she was in a Jesuit parish when she was growing up in Mazagon.
Okay.
So she knew of many Jesuits and the lovely work they did.
Absolutely.
And after coming to India, to Bombay, after coming here and after I started studying, I would hear from her inspiring stories of many Jesuits. So she would talk of Father Juan, for instance, who's at Bandra right now, that Father Juan would take us for camps and do programs and this and that. And 22 years he was there, and he'd be very generous and all of that. And Father Rodrigues, you will have heard of Rodrigues.
Yes.
Rodrigues would take the boys for camps, and he would come and take someone on the scooter and organize programs and self-esteem programs and group building and all kinds of things. All through my early years, after we came to Mumbai, she would talk about these inspiring men. And I think that was where the seed of my vocation began to grow.
Sure.
I was just listening to these stories, but I knew it was already creating some kind of churning within me,
Right.
even at that early age. Now, we were in a Jesuit parish, Holy Family.
Right.
I was in a Jesuit parish, in a Jesuit school, and in a Jesuit college.
Wow.
So I knew many Jesuits. I knew a lot about the Jesuit ideals even before I joined the
Right.
society.
Right.
In fact, some of my companions would say that mine is an adulterated vocation, because already with the Jesuits he got snapped up. So the Jesuit ideals already kept growing in me in different ways. In one big way, it grew through a person, Father Tony V. D'Souza. I'd like to mention his name.
Okay.
Father Tony V is also in Bandra right now.
Okay.
And he had what was called a group called Seekers. Not seeking her, Seekers. We met often for 5 years after my 10th standard till the end of college studies. I joined after my college studies.
Okay.
And this was a group of like-minded guys who were searching for something in life, who were looking for something deeper.
Okay.
People in love with God, wanting to give generously to society and to serve in different ways. So we'd come all through our college years for Seekers meetings right here in this place, Vinayalaya.
Wow.
Right here on weekends, once a month, and we'd have programs and some sharing. Outreach was a big part of the Seekers program. So he would take us to the Home for the Aged and to the Mount at Bandra
Right.
to be able to help out with people who are disadvantaged, disabled, to sell tea in a little stall and all kinds of things. So through those years, my love for doing something for the world began to grow. Well, there was one incident, if I were to pinpoint one incident that really made me say, this is the life I want to live. It was this, very briefly. One day I was sitting up till late night watching TV. This was just after my 12th standard exams.
Okay.
And at that time, our cable operator would air on cable TV. Cable TV also was new.
Yeah.
The footage or the video recording of a wedding that had recently taken place in the colony. So if any wedding took place in the
Okay.
colony, they would air it on TV, maybe
my
that
God.
night or the next day.
Okay.
And I was waiting for a football game. And football
Okay.
games all late.
Right.
And that football game was not on, and you had this wedding playing, and I'm waiting and I'm watching, and I actually half asleep, half irritated, half anxious, waiting for the game, and this wedding was playing. And you know, in any Catholic wedding here, you have a
Yes.
photo shoot
Yeah.
after the whole thing and all, and the bride and the bridegroom posing in different ways, the bride on the floor, you know, with the gown
Yeah,
all
yeah,
over.
absolutely.
And for a moment, I went into a bit of a trance. I don't know what happened. Till this day, I can't explain what I experienced that day. But for a moment, I just had my eyes transfixed on the screen, looking at that bride and the bridegroom. And after a little while, in the face of the groom, I could see myself, almost imagine myself. And I got transported in time, say a few years ahead. And I almost, without saying this consciously to myself, one day this will be my story. Like one day maybe I'll be married and I'll have a wife and there'll be children and I'll go to work and I'll come back and there'll be a job and I'll go to work and I'll come back and I'll go to work again and I'll come back and there'll be other concerns, you know. Something told me this cannot be my life, or this is not for me. You know, my world, I feel called to a world that's much broader, that's much bigger. Of course, I could have been a good family person. All this was not at the conscious level, but it was just happening. And it was in that moment I felt very strongly that the Lord is calling me to something much wider, much bigger, to be able to give of my energies and the many talents He blessed me with for the benefit of many, especially those who are in need of it very much.
For a higher purpose.
For a higher purpose. And it was that night, I remember, it was almost close to 1 o'clock, that I felt that deep assurance and a lasting kind of a peace. Just before that I was really irritated, no game, but I felt a lasting peace that this is what God is calling me to. Of course, before this I kept pondering it a number of times. And yet I said to myself, I'm going to test my vocation, I'm going to complete my college studies, and I did that. I went to St. Xavier's College, finished my college studies with a view to keeping on pondering this calling and then eventually joining. And that's what finally happened. I completed my graduation in physics at St. Xavier's College. There again I saw inspiring Jesuits, both in Holy Family School and at St. Xavier's College. Another thing that really, one of the traits that really captivated me about the Jesuits was how they served cheerfully and happily. All kinds of works, teaching in a college or teaching in a school or doing parish work or conducting a funeral or going out into the districts, their generosity was total. Of course, not without their own imperfections and their own limitations. But this was something that really captivated me from the earliest days and what made me want to say yes to this kind of life in the society.
Can you talk about any other challenges that you majorly face ministering around?
One of the biggest challenges for me, I don't see it not only as a challenge, I see it also as an opportunity, is being present to young people. And I say young people because the juniors who are with me also are young people.
Okay.
Why do I say being present? Of course, I'm there physically all the time. But many youngsters today have a story to tell. Many come from families. All of us came from families where everything was not perfect. But many have had difficult situations in life. Many are on the road to healing. Many are looking for a deeper sense of purpose. Okay, albeit with the whole vocation to religious life, but a deeper sense of meaning. They are looking for a listening ear, for someone to empathize, to understand, to accept and to affirm. Now, all of that means presence, it means time, it means lending a listening ear. And as being the one in charge, I've got to blend the thing of authority, okay, pulling someone up, or being very patient, understanding, or giving someone a whack in the back when that's needed. So blending roles is a big challenge.
You have to find the balance between.
It's a challenge so I've got to also, not discipline for discipline's sake, but of course somebody has to be tough.
You are the dean.
Somebody has to be gentle as well.
Right.
And patient and understanding. And to be honest, they respond very well.
Okay.
They respond very well. I believe if you are good with them, they are good with you. We see the world
Of course.
not as it is, but as we are. So yeah, that's one ongoing challenge of being able to invest more and more time with them. Time is always at a premium today. With the number of ministries and with the diminishing number of Jesuits in our province. We are in a place which is exciting. We get called from all kinds of places around the parish and in the convents to be able to help and minister with masses, talks, confessions. So finding that right balance of work outside, work in the house, being present to them is an ongoing challenge.
If I were to ask you, what is it that excites you the most, or what makes you want to get out of bed and start the day?
Well, good question. There are so many things that excite me about the Jesuit life. If I were to pinpoint one thing that excites me the most about Jesuit living, well, at least this has been in my mind for some time. It is not knowing where I will be placed next.
The uncertainty.
The uncertainty, or just that spirit of availability. You know, for us Jesuits, as part of the different ideals, one of the big ideal is that of availability. There's a lovely book called Availability, or Apostolic Availability, the heart of the Jesuit identity. And this was so central to the heart of our founder, Father Ignatius and his companions, to place oneself at the disposal of the Pope, which means the official church, which means God, to be sent anywhere, wherever the need is greater. This is something that has always excited me. I mean, it causes a great consolation, and there's also uncertainty, as you said, both ways. And it's that uncertainty that brings a certain peacefulness and assuredness. I know it sounds ironic.
It does.
That is something that is so close, so much integral to the Jesuit way of life, and so much that I feel strongly about, and I've lived it. I'll give you an example. When I was just completing my studies in theology at Denobli College in Pune, and we were meant to do 4 years or 3.5 years. And when I was in my third year itself, in fact my provincial, the one in charge, wanted me to do further studies and to train myself for this year of teaching in language and the humanities. And something happened. Some Jesuit had to be pulled out from this juniorate and sent to another job. At that time the juniorate was in a far off place called Desur. Far off means about 17 kilometers from Belgaum in Karnataka. Lovely place, very cool weather, but forest like location. Anyway, not very ideal for juniorate life. And this Jesuit who was there had to be called in to another important position because he suited the job. And the provincials discern, they think, okay, come on, now where to find a man now? And they say, Leroy, you go to Desur. Well, the plan was something else. The plan was to go for studies and then to prepare myself and all. And he says, Leroy, are you ready to go? Not are you ready to go? He told me, Leroy, I'm sending you to Desur. And I said, yes.
Wow. I
don't know where that yes came from. Well, I've said yes to everything the society has asked of me. Not that it's not been painful. It's been difficult. I know sometimes there's been a feeling which I've suppressed or not. But there's something about the Jesuit thing. Yes, I'm going to go. And I went there as dean at not being ordained. This was something unheard of. And a challenging place, a challenging community, managing a big number of brothers. 2 or 3 of the brothers were older than me when I went to the juniorate. These were things unheard of. And I said to myself, where am I thrown into? But I just said, this is where God wants me to be. The uncertainty, that's part of the Jesuit life. But it's never uncertainty for uncertainty's sake. It simply means uncertainty because we are certain that God knows what's happening. God is in charge. And God literally took care of not only those years, but all those years that followed it. 2 there and 2 over here.
So Father Learoy, what are your present concerns, your fears, your anxieties, and how do you cope with them?
One of my biggest fears is the fear or the anxiety of the future, looking at the state of religious life. Now, I'm a young Jesuit. We have few young Jesuits. Well, the demographic trends across the world are different as far as priestly vocations are concerned. In the West, it's different. Within India, it's quite different also. In Bombay, we seem to mirror very much the Western trends in terms of declining numbers. So, one of my anxieties is, what religious life will be like looking ahead 5 years, 10 years ahead. Not just numbers, but in terms of relevance, in terms of the state of the church and the whole interaction between the church and society in general. Some communities seem to have almost kept church aside and said, no, let not church interfere with matters that are secular. And that is true, and that is fair enough. But the church has also been a great civilizing agent in society, not just a religious body in the religious sense of sacramentality and the sacraments. A body that has helped influence culture, the family, society, helped promote values, character, morals, has helped bind communities and promote peace and goodwill and all of that. It's sad that it'll be sad if society loses some of that leavening kind of agent which the church really is. So matters like this are what play on my mind sometime. Of course, they're much better right now. I've come to a certain acceptance and all. But a few years earlier, it used to be, what's the church going to be like? Where am I going to find myself? Are we going to be relevant at all? So my fears have been a fear of the future. Anxieties are about the future, of course. And yet at the same time, this gets balanced with the assurance that things will be well. I don't have to think about the future one moment at a time.
Absolutely.
We used to talk of one day at a time. There was a Jesuit in our parish who would always look at it, one day at a time, one day at a time. Now he's changed his dialogue in the last couple of years. One moment at a time. One day is too long.
Right,
one moment at a time, which is very true. Now, in the head it sounds very good, one moment at a time, yes. But we know what anxieties go on within us. State of religious life, the religious fervor that is going to prevail, and the more worrisome part is that of young people finding sacramental life not very appealing. Not spirituality. Young people are looking for spirituality, they're looking for meaning and depth and something deeper, not necessarily in the sacramental sense. So how can we respond creatively to that? To take young people along and to say we're looking for the same things, for meaning. We find that meaning in God, and that sense of purpose, and that drive to work for people and to give generously, and yet help people through areas that they are comfortable with, and help them understand areas that they are not comfortable with in the church. So these are all broad questions. How do we cope with this? Well, there are lots of ways of coping. One communal way of coping is many of the young priests in our province are part of a group called, we are part of a process called psycho-spiritual inner processing. This is inner process work which we do with one of our Jesuits, Father Dudley Mendonça. We meet about twice or thrice a year over a period of 4-5 days just to be able to understand processes that have gone on in our life. Anxiety questions, what has built up in us from our earliest days, and how can we come to a greater assuredness and peace and calm and acceptance of our situation and just keep giving off our best. So through rounds of sharings, through going deeper in matters that are psycho-spiritual, there's a greater grasp of and a greater assuredness in living out this way of life.
So, Father, what is your vision for the church in India and also the church at large overall?
I think the church has to move towards being a more participatory church. We cannot any longer be a church which was of the old school top-down approach, where the church knew all and the church continues to pontificate and dictate and tell people how society and the world should be run. We've got to understand, we've got to reawaken the whole notion of people of God, which Vatican II spoke of, which means that has to be seen in spirit and also in concrete manners of governance, which is not an easy thing for the church.
Yeah.
To be able to relinquish power and to be able to dissipate things and to be able to bring people to participate, women, men, old, young, lay people, and everyone, into a shared responsibility for helping people in their growth in faith and in altruistic works. So a greater sharing, a greater renunciation of authority in that sense, so that there may be equal opportunity for all to be able to help the Spirit work through all of us to see where the church is going and to understand how to move ahead.
So, what message would you like to pass on to the families and our young viewers in general?
Well, quite simply this: just come back to the basics. I mean, this is my message for myself these years of my life, entry into midlife, but it's my message also for all people, just to come back to the essentials of life. What are those essentials? Our minds are crammed with so many things, and social media and a fast-paced life and jobs, and we are scampering for things, moving from one thing to the other. Some of the essentials are getting lost. Just that time spent with people, time to listen, time to relish, time to cherish nature and a friend and things like that, time at home. I think we just got to come back to the basics, come back to the essentials of life that really make us human. And many of the problems that we seem to have these days will be much better. They won't be solved overnight, but they will be much better, I think. Just to come back to the basics. And that's what the church is all about. That's what Jesuit living also is all about. That's what the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius of Loyola is all about. To help people come home to who they really are. To be at peace with oneself, to be at peace with the environment, and to be at peace with God.
Thank you so much for that lovely message. I think it's really important that we need to slow down in this fast-paced life. And what struck me the most was that how cheerfully you spoke about the uncertainty, which is actually could be a burden to all of us. I mean, we are cocooned in our comfortable lives, and you were so cheerful about it, and I think that's something we should learn. Thank you so much for watching us on this episode. God bless.